All right, Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott back again for another episode of the Nolecast. As always, we will thank our sponsors. 3 simple ingredients, 1 fantastic product. Whether it be just the traditional Louisiana hot sauce or the spiffy Louisiana hot sauce processed or at least aged, matured in a bourbon barrel. Can't go wrong. Fantastic. Cheap addition to any meal. 3 simple ingredients, 1 fantastic sponsor, and 1 great title sponsor for us since it's 2016 now. Tarpinsellers.com are the other great people that we tip our hat to when we start our show. And, Bud, we got a lot of great, fantastic conversation tonight. Got a new addition to the staff that we're able to talk about here. See some other people out there in the college football landscape adding to their staff aggressively in perhaps a manner that is reflective of the more consistent level of competency that Florida State showed over the last 8 to 10 months. And then we may even have some staff change potentially to do with conference personnel as well. So a couple different things for us to jump around on this morning. And from here, let's let it ride.
Man, so I got to tell you, like, I'm just back from convention, and other staffs are like, they know I went to Florida State. A lot of them listen to Cover 3. Not a lot of other staffs listening to the Nolecast. But we found this out. There are a couple guys who didn't even go to Florida State or play for Florida State who coach, who are big-time FSU fans, right? Like, I'm not going to give any more hints than that because I don't want, anyway. But, like, they'll DM us or hit us up in person. Like, what do you think about this? I'm like, don't you coach it? Like, Pac-12 school? It's like, yeah, man. But, like, I just, Florida State, grew up in the early 90s. That was my jam.
If you're of the age, you either hate us or love us. Absolutely.
A lot more respect for that polo going around, man. For sure. They're noticing what the Noles are doing in the transfer portal, and they're noticing, just I think some of the top recruits that are taking a look. I know Alex Atkins got a lot of praise. People I talked to for really getting in on Simmons like before the Noles started winning ball games. Right. And so I think that really speaks to the relationship that he built there. Like, that was the one kid that people were like, oh yeah, that guy. Got some more positive feedback on Edwin Joseph from some people who really liked him. So potentially maybe a little bit of an underrated kid there. I mean, we have him pretty high anyway, because his times are really good. But yeah, man. What do you want to lead it off with? Probably Pat Surtain.
Yeah, I think the DB coach has been out there for a couple of days, but still is probably the most pertinent thing that we can talk about. Really interesting hire. I know that they certainly looked at a lot of people and had a lot of people reach out to them. It's probably the first hire they've ever made where they had more inbound inquiries than maybe they initially knew what to do with. So it's again kind of reflective of where Florida State is right now and what they're seeing from some parties from abroad. Also, I think this was kind of a, it didn't come as a surprise to any. Well, people were able to look at this position for a couple months now and wonder whether or not it was going to become open. And ultimately it did. Pat Surtain, fantastic hire. I think some of the other names that were really strongly, legitimately considered would have been good hires as well, but I don't know that they would have had quite the South Florida recruiting chops that Surtain has the ability to potentially bring to you. And when you talk about NFL experience, when you talk about head coach experience at one of the more influential powerhouses of high school football in South Florida, you talk about working with the Dolphins, and then you talk about just his own particular bona fides as far as what he was able to do as a player. This certainly seems to be a significant hire and a very good one from that of what we can judge at this time.
So I think this is most likely a good hire. It has potential to be like a absolute home run hire. There's a little bit of uncertainty just because, like, and I know Pat a little bit. He's coached on South Florida Express for a long time. That was a major 7-on team down there, still is. Down in South Florida, run by Brett Getz and Chad Wilson and a couple other guys also run that thing. So I've seen him certainly coach, right? And then he was head coach, as you mentioned, at Heritage and won multiple state titles. And he was this his first year with the Dolphins, I believe, but still, like it's good to have some coaching at the pro level. The dude played in the NFL for and played and started in the NFL for a decade, including with the Dolphins. So saw his son go through a major recruitment, obviously signed with Bama, now in the NFL. I do think that he, really is a lot of what you're looking for. The only thing we don't know, and I mean, you have to say this because if it doesn't work out, the reasons why would be like not coached at the college level, hasn't spent that much time as a pure DB coach, right? If we're being fair, and we don't know how well Pat will recruit. Now, here's the thing: I think Pat will recruit well. He is not, unless he changes his personality, like he is not a real loud, rah, constantly on Twitter type of dude. He's a little bit understated. There's a quiet confidence about him. I think that his name, does a lot of the talking for him, and I do think he connects with kids pretty well. That's a good recipe to have. I think he's a guy who will command respect. I can't guarantee it's a home run hire because I haven't seen him recruit, and recruiting really, like in the last 18 months, has totally changed in terms of how things are done. But you still do need to have those relationships, and you need to have a name that the kids down there are going to respect and listen to. So are there guys that I would have wanted within this existing structure? Meaning, like, if you're going to keep Fuller and you're going to keep Randy Shannon, I think it's a gamble to do so. And we'll talk about this in a minute because you look at Clemson addressing some of their weaknesses and making big changes. If you want to keep the rest of the defensive staff together, there's not many guys that I, would have wanted to go after instead. Like when I heard the name, I was like, oh, I think that's probably a really, really good upside play with relatively minimal downside.
Some of the other names that you heard out there, I think would have been safe. I don't know, like what you said, would have had quite as much upside as this one. This does have the potential to be, I think, legitimately as good a hire as you could make. Obviously, you yeah, it's hard, that's what you want to say as a fan. You want to think that this has the potential to be an exceptional hire. It certainly does. I think some of the other names that you heard out there, like TJ Rushing, would have been a great candidate. I just don't know that he would have potentially let you live some of the Florida recruiting dreams as far as.
And you're not going to get Rushing, and like Rushing's not going to come work for Fuller. Right. Like I believe Rushing would be a guy you would replace Fuller with if you were going to get him. He's not going to come be your DB coach. That was the kind of thing like Clinkscale, I think, is the same way, or at least need to have an assistant DC title, not this passing game. Right. Because it's clear to anybody with eyes knows you're not one of the top two. Like passing game coordinator, secondary coach is the third on the rung there as far as titles you can give out. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think there are guys who are more proven who would not come to be third, just from the intel that I gathered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How much do you think, like respect-wise, compared to what Woodson got? Do you think he's able to sort of push back against Fuller more if necessary, or like insert other ideas? Like what do you think? Obviously Fuller talked to this guy and was on board, so you got to think. I mean, you got to think there's a mutual respect there.
You would have to think that. I mean, you would have to think that certainly from Fuller's standpoint, as far as what the individual was able to do from a playing perspective. But yeah, that is the one concern that I would have, is just you've got to now merge with a staff that you're not that familiar with, and you've got a guy who may be quiet spoken, but certainly has a high degree of confidence in himself, and the job that he's done now has to, somewhat fall in line with a broader position, or the broader side of the staff on that side of the ball. So, you never know how those dynamics work, and how does a guy really want to be the dominant figure in his room? That may clash with the current setup. I don't know that to be the case. I'm just saying, kind of in general. So. All that stuff's always going to be in play when you hire somebody like that and you're bringing them in. But that would be, that will be what I kind of put my ear to the ground and listen to as far as what the earliest feedback is as far as how everything's working on this side of the ball.
Key word you said there was his room. There are definitely guys who were on last year's staff who didn't think that was Woodson's room.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in that dynamic. Like, is DB still Fuller's room, or does it really become Pat Surtain's room? Does he make it his own? I think it'd be great if he did. You know, and like that's a guy. If you're a kid, if you're a player on the team, I don't want to call them kids. If you're a player on the team, if you don't listen to a guy who's won a state title, coached in the NFL, was one of the best corners in the NFL for 10 years, and personally coached his son up, right? Who is now, it was a first round draft pick, I think, or late second, or I think it was first. And then now is one of the best corners in the NFL. That's probably a you problem, not a, right. So I do think he'll have greater respect within the room. I'm excited about the move. I'm interested to see how it works out, but I think it's, I think it's going to be pretty solid, man. Also, you got talent coming in, right? Fentrell Cypress it just makes this room so much more diverse and ability to move pieces around. If you got a guy that you feel like is, sort of a no doubt draft pick and maybe a high draft pick if everything works out, right? I mean, it just makes this thing a lot more dangerous.
Yeah. Cypress is a great tool to hand over to anybody. It'd be fascinating to see how that works, what the early reports are. But as far as, on the whole, I would grade this higher. That of what we know, I would grade it probably in the low 90s. And I don't, normally go giving away marks like this. I think you have the ability to address the most pressing need that you have, which is to have a kind of a tip of the spear when it comes to high school recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. Don't really have that other than, you don't really have that at this time. So got a chance to make a big splash when it comes to recruiting, and you've got a guy who has all the ability and background in the world to make you think that he's going to be a more than competent position group coach. So this will be a fun one to watch play out. And as of that, how we can judge it at this point, I think it was a very, very strong hire.
Speaking of strong hires, I think we're shifting to a point here. It's not like we won't cover other opponents that FSU plays, but especially for this year, I mean, you are focused on about 4 to 6 games, and there's 6 games where you should just roll the ball out with the amount of talent the team has now and win easily. Clemson is the most important game on this schedule for getting back to where you want to get, which is the ACC title game, to win it, right? Like, if you win that game at Clemson, the odds that you were in Charlotte are extremely high. And they noticed they had an offense that was not taking the next step. And they went out and they fired Brandon Streeter and they hired Garrett Riley. Like, that's a gangster move on Dabo's part. Like, that's a move I wasn't sure he was going to make, because he used to make moves like this when he went out and he got hotshot OC Chad Morris.
Mm-hmm.
And then for like the last couple of years, he's just promoted internally and thought everything was fine. I mean, that's a pretty good move, man. Like, Clemson may not be just taking this line down.
No, I mean, I don't think so at all. I think I think this was a solid move, a really good move. I don't think there's anything else that, any other way that you can label it. I mean, I know that Dabo has an incredible amount of support at Clemson, and I'm not trying to suggest anything else, but I know there's also some guys, and Bud and I, we talked about this personally a couple of days ago. There's some guys who have said that they are wildly appreciative of what Dabo Swinney's done, but like, this is not going to become the Dabo Swinney, internal project, that he has total autonomy and everything else. And I'm not saying this was forced on him at all. I just think Clemson's probably done a pretty delicate job of kind of guiding a coach that has all the leverage and all the goodwill in the world into making a really good decision here. And firing somebody early, firing somebody when it needed to be done, and bringing in one of the brighter minds on that side of ball. So it'll be interesting to see how long he's there. It'll be interesting to see how well, Garrett blends into to that staff. But between hiring Garrett Riley and and bringing back Scott, the former USF coach, in a more recruiting role. That was always interesting to see how that works when you go home for a second time, and rarely do those things work out in the manner that people think they will in the back of their mind. But I think two more than above average moves by Dabo, and an acknowledgement that Florida State has got its collective house in order a hell of a lot more than they have maybe over the past half decade or so.
Agreed. I mean, it's going to be a major test for that defensive staff we just talked about, right? It's also, I mean, like, that's going to be one of the games that you're paid to win. And Clemson, Garrett Riley's going to be paid, to beat Florida State. Like, that's one of these games you circle. Those are the games you got to get. Now, they have lost some key pieces that I don't think Florida State staff is sad that they have lost Henry and Brzee and Murphy. They got some key guys back. They got Ruku, they got Tyler Davis, but the dudes who were like legit first round type talents, for the most part, are going early, and that does help you quite a bit, I think.
It does. Henry was the one that I particularly was excited to see, go on down to Sunday. But they've recruited really well. They're going to have talent there. I don't know that they have, plug-in guys with first-round potential overall, but they've certainly done well and have continued to stack talent. And whether it be Riley or coaches on the defensive side of the ball, I don't think they're going to struggle to find, adequate pieces with which to plug into their plan.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Elsewhere in the ACC, they are not on the Noles schedule, but I do think this is relevant. North Carolina finally parted ways with Dre Bly. North Carolina's corners and DBs just looked uncoached the last 2 years. So when we talk about, and I'm bringing this up because they're not on FSU schedule, but I want to bring this up. People are like, hey, go hire so-and-so to be the Noles DB coach or to bring him on as this role or that role. If you hire guys who are not proven in a role and they're an alum, it is that much harder to fire them, especially if they were a really good player.
And the head coach coached them when they were a really good player.
Exactly. I mean, this is the thing. Like, I am very against hiring alums who are not proven elsewhere because of that aspect. And then it gets messy, right? You have boosters who I'm sure love the guy. And that's need to be proven at a different level, I think. So literally, I mean, I'm reading this here. Am I missing where else he coached? So he was the San Diego Fleet coach, which is in the AAF, and then the AAF disbanded. I don't know. Maybe Dre Bly turned into a great coach. This is just the example I want to bring up. So when you say hire guy, I'm not going to name him here. Like hire this dude. He was on this staff for a little bit. Hire this guy. Hire that guy. If I'm hiring an alum, I want a strong track record because I need to know it's going to work out. If it doesn't, it's that much harder to fire the guy.
Yeah, there were some whispers behind the scenes that had been a little bit of a messy situation for quite a while, and
right,
tough to get cleaned up for the reasons that you spelled out. If you don't like messy situations and you don't like situations that have to get cleaned up, talk to Shannon Young. There's no better guy in the business. Bud's worked with him twice. I'm working on a project now with Shannon. There is no one more professional. There is no more responsive. Chad and Shannon truly are the legendary team. 844 FSU Loan, 844 FSU Loan. I haven't looked at the numbers, but we've done well more than 400. I think we are probably legitimately close to 500 Nolecast listeners at this point who have either secured original financing or otherwise from them. So big shout out to the great team at Legendary Home Loans, and thank you for the leadership that they continue to provide this podcast.
From the chat, and first of all, absolutely, Chad and Shannon did a tremendous job. Ron Dugan's being an alum, people in the chat had asked, do you think Ron Dugan's had a proven track record? I do, right? Ron Dugan's had coached for 15 years before the Noles hired him, not 1 year. Like, that's a big difference to me. I mean, he was I'm trying to think. He might have coached in the NFL for a little bit. when in his NFL career had to be done like early 2000s, right? So he was at Louisville for a little while. I don't know. I know he was at USF and then he was at Miami and then he came here. So yeah, I do consider that a much more proven track record than that. I want to bring this up to you. Big Ten commish Kevin Warren is going to be the president of the Chicago Bears. Jim Phillips has been the ACC commissioner for 2 years now, I think. Do we think he's going back to the Big Ten? Is that something we need to be concerned about?
I don't even know if we should be concerned if it does happen. I don't even know if I don't know that you couldn't appoint like the best person in the world when it comes to college athletics, and they're going to change the ACC's trajectory. Me personally, now maybe that's just me being fatalistic. Blah blah blah. I don't think that that Phillips has done a bang up job so far in his time in Greensboro, now Charlotte, or soon to be Charlotte. Again, I don't know that it's even possible to do such a thing at this point. I mean, being a conference commissioner is steering a giant aircraft carrier. I mean, these things don't turn on a dime. You don't simply pivot and go from one direction to another. It was, made all the important by the direction, perhaps wrong direction, that John Swofford sailed this ship in for so long that I don't mean to be negative or fatalistic. I just don't know that there's a whole lot that could be done in this space. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if we don't find out in 10 days or so that Jim Phillips has been offered the Big Ten job and plans to take it in a expedient manner as possible. But
I think that's fair. I also wonder, what are your cards you really have to play in the ACC? You got a lot of brands that just people are not going to care about.
I think he's more or less told you that he has no cards to play. His cards are hoping that someone deals him cards that happen to have a Notre Dame logo on it. And that's
not going to.
I think that's where the conference is at this point. I
right.
mean, that or some, for some reason, some tech giant strikes a deal with the ACC that they don't otherwise have an interest in striking with other conferences, which is slim to zero. So,
yeah, from a Knowles perspective, that's why I think you got to get out of this league in the long term, or alternatively, you need to be so damn good that the ACC cannot afford to lose you, and they give you some kind of sweetheart deal to where you're not getting 6% split of revenue across all 14 teams. You're getting like a 10 or 11% share, and if that means that some teams are pretty bad, okay, they're already bad. I mean, if some team goes from being, power rated 80th in the nation to 120th, the ACC needs to get teams into the playoff. The ACC needs to be represented. The top of the conference is who you are, right? The bottom of the SEC this year was not particularly good. This was one of the worst SECs I've seen in a while. However, the top 4 teams in the SEC beat the other 4 conference champions by like 200 combined points, I think it was, right? Because Bama crushed Kansas State by like 40. Clemson lost by 15 or 20. Obviously, TCU lost by a bowl record to Georgia, and I forgot the other one. Anyway, the top of the league is who you are. Nobody's gonna look back and say, well, yeah, Ole Miss laid an egg against Texas Tech, and this team against that and whatnot. You got to get out of this league, or you got to get a sweetheart deal in the long term, which is why it's so important that the Noles maintain a really high roster quality and that they play a really good brand of football pretty much year in and year out, so that they are too big to fail, essentially. Yeah.
This conversation may be the motivating and driving point behind a certain entity that has come about on the landscape in the more recent months. I mean, everybody is acting in a manner that wants Florida State in the best light possible, both for internally and externally. So I'll just keep it nice, broad, and ambiguous. But
operating like a startup, need to get bought.
Yes.
Florida State football. Welcome to my TED Talk. Oh my gosh. Let's talk a little personnel management. And first, let's talk about Congruity, man. I know you have a great experience with them, and they keep adding pieces.
Great experience with them, and I am currently talking with Matt Lewis about our own management of personnel, and there's no better people to be doing it with. Very flexible in what it takes for them to work with you, whether or not you got 100 employees or you got 2 or 3 that you're just kind of trying to get an entity off the ground right now. Worked with Matt at my previous place of employment. Obviously, you and I have worked with him in our own little small humble business here. Congruityhr.com is the website. And as many of you have, if you wish to reach out to me directly, I'm more than happy to put you in touch with Matt. But payroll, HR, or anything else that you need assistance with to see your business function in as optimized manner as possible, Matt Lewis and his team are the people that I would strongly, strongly encourage you to speak with.
Absolutely. So let me see things I had picked up. There are people who would know who think Jackson is the best D tackle Florida State has signed in the portal, and think he's a really good player. I think there's a decent now. There's some new waiver requirements for him to get eligible to NCAA pass. So I'm interested to see how that all plays out. I think, like, are you operating under the expectation he's playing this year? Because I think I kind of am until proven otherwise.
Yes, I I am. There's some conversation here that I've got to be careful with having, but I expect that ultimately he'll be able to get his waiver. There are some people that you can provide athletes in situations like this as far as legal assistance. And I believe that he'll have every potential ability in the world to get that waiver approved and be eligible to play immediately.
When I saw those new requirements, I was like, "Oh, billable hours! Congrats, lawyers!" Like that. That's great. Yeah, it's simply trying to make things more restrictive. Probably won't work.
Yeah, well, that makes me happy, man. That last weekend when Jackson and all this other stuff happened was it was a fun time. It was a fun time, and fortunately, I'd given Christina a corgi about 5 days earlier. Otherwise, she might have executed me on the spot at my engagement party as I spent Friday night on the phone trying to figure out exactly what we were doing at the defensive line unit. So it's all worked out, and that makes me happy.
You guys got a puppy? Okay.
Got a corgi. That is
what's the name?
That is Collective Insurance, bud. If you get it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, do I have to go in my office and close the door for 4 hours? Or here's a corgi. Hambone. Hambone is the best purchase that I could have ever made. Yes.
Man, look, buddy, like things are looking. The chat says you look like Pierce Brosnan.
Well,
and you just got a corgi. Like that's quality.
This is an AM recording of the Nolecast, and a shower buzz was but recent. So
we also have people in the chat who think this show is not live.
Yes, that was. I get it. I mean, we had a 9 o'clock or an 8 o'clock on the YouTube yesterday, and I had to call Bud at 7:55 and tell him my computer just tapped out and said no moss yesterday. So ran to the store, bought a new one, and here we are this morning. So
switch that AM or PM to AM, and
yeah, exactly. No one ever knew no one ever knew the difference.
Oh man. So like I think from a personnel standpoint, Jackson is a big get because like Fabo is a guy who can play both positions, and if Jackson can give you 500 snaps at nose, that allows you to sort of float Fabo a little bit in that, like, he can play a lot of 3-tech if he wants, and just it makes the room so much deeper. It means you can move Fisk around to wherever really you want to play him, right? Probably more some 3, and it just pushes down everybody in terms of when they need to arrive, not having to play guys too early.
We may have to dedicate 30 minutes to our defensive line snap count draft alone next year. I mean, it's going to be fascinating when just from the interior, not just D-Mac versus Gilbert and Pat Payton on the outside, but my Lord, what a unit, what a great unit to hand Odell here, and that'll be fascinating because I'd be surprised. Well, assuming health is maintained, I'd almost be surprised if somebody gets into the 500s at that unit. You're going to be doing it's going to be a lot of cyclical rotation.
And we talked on the last show, like, do you want to play Fabo for 500 snaps? Does he want to play 500 snaps?
Right. Yeah.
Probably not. Right. I mean, the guy's trying to get to the NFL, wants to showcase himself against the best people. That is also in Florida State's interest that he stays healthy against the best teams. And I think you're going to be able to rotate a lot of dudes in, against certain teams. You're just looking at the schedule, like Vatek this year was horrendous on the offensive line.
Yeah.
You're going to have two non-conference games where the O-line is probably pretty sketch. You'll have another 2 or 3 in conference where it's probably not that good. Syracuse is getting crushed in the transfer portal right now, unfortunately for them. So they may be worse than they were down the stretch this year. I mean, you're going to have a lot of opportunities for these young kids, man, to step up and play.
Well, the 4 that everybody's going to look at is DJ, Fabo, Fisk, and then, well, I guess the 3, and then you immediately have got this younger group that you're going to want to get as many snaps as possible with Farmer, AO, Lyons, etc. It's a remarkably talented group. Malcolm Ray obviously is in that mix as well. So we'll be curious. And then
Lyons,
what do you do with Briggs? Briggs is a talented guy that you still hope to have a higher level of play than you've seen as he comes back from an injury last year. Massive internal expectations, or at least optimism surrounding Joshua Farmer. So defensive line is going to be remarkable.
Yeah, the depth that allows Odell to develop here, I think, is really, really key. Like, you're going to lose Fabo after this year, unless, I don't know, maybe battle's end, right? It's just like Fabo lifetime contract.
We got a 29-year-old defensive tackle. Absolutely.
I'm sure Georgia would love that. It was Stetson Bennett, right? You profile this team, certain guys will leave for the league eventually, and what the drop off, if there is one at certain spots, looks like for 24. But D line, on the interior is one that maybe you can have a more minimal drop off because of the depth that you're allowed to develop. That's a great comment from Castro. We're gonna put that on the screen. Look at that. That's a multi-year deal.
It was a big get. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you go puppy or did you go?
He's pure wild puppy. Yeah, absolutely.
How does he get along with the cat?
The cat just beat his ass first day he was there pretty good and established dominance, and so far they've worked well from there.
I was Mags went to go take a shower, right? And so I was like, watch the kids. Like, got it, no problem. And Liam's like, hey, I'm gonna jump over Huddy. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, Hudson's a gigantic 1-year-old. We have all these toys all around the house. Like, why do we need to jump over the living thing, right? In like the 20 minutes that Mags wants to like have some time to herself and go take a shower, because like my ass is toast if she hears like there's like the angry cry and then there's like the I'm hurt cry, and so like your number one goal then is let her take the shower in peace. I'm like, we're not jumping over the 1-year-old, 3-year-old jump over. So I set up a little obstacle course. They did that. It was good. She was happy to have me home after convention.
After being at convention for 3 days,
yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, like I'm very excited about where this defensive line is going, with the versatile pieces. Briggs is a great question, buddy. Like they have got to be able to play a bigger variety of fronts this year and keep people guessing. One of our main complaints on this show has been that the better offenses, especially the ones with decent quarterbacks, they know they can formation and motion FSU into predictable coverages, and Florida State does not vary its fronts very much. So you just kind of like they play with confidence, at least this past year, against Adam Fuller's defense. And you need to confuse people more and put people in uncomfortable situations. Like that's one of the challenges, or not challenges. It shouldn't be a challenge given the pieces you have. That's one of the things that you're going to have to see from Fuller's defense this year, right? And he's going to have to work, obviously, with Odell and Papuchis to make sure those guys feel comfortable playing the variety of roles. But more varied fronts, more keeping offenses guessing, more putting guys in position to make plays, finding those favorable matchups up front, and you have the pieces to do it now. I mean, I like D tackle better than I like end, but I mean, Briggs, as you mentioned, is a really interesting piece. You could go with like a heavy pass rush thing with Briggs and Fisk if you needed to. If Verse needs a blow, this is pretty fun.
Yeah. I personally love just where you are in general at end and defensive tackle, but defensive tackle is just a level of options that is truly remarkable. So you've got some great things then, and then it's going to be interesting to see what you do with some of these pieces in the secondary. I mean, Akeem Dent, Akeem, never to be called Greg again, has decided to return. That's a good piece to have, particularly when you lost Jamie to the NFL. So Shaheem Brown, Akeem Dent, and then it'll be interesting to see if you don't move a piece internally to safety, as you certainly have a lot of similar level players, I would say, at cornerback, and maybe there's a guy there that can move to safety, or maybe there's a little bit more definition as to who your nickel is, how you use them, etc. But I think there's a ton of pieces out there that probably one or two of them will have, will have what's expected of them to be sharpened up a little bit, and perhaps that's a pure position move. Maybe that's just where you do some things in particular packages that have you get a different perspective.
100%. I mean, look, Renardo Green makes the most sense to me to move, just because he did play safety previously, and he's a little stouter than maybe some of the other guys who you could move. I mean, could you move Duke Cooper? I guess. What does he say to that? Or does he say, no, like, peace, I'm going to transfer you, try to move me to safety? I don't know. If you talk to Green, you're probably like, hey, what is your if you're going to play professional football, where do you think that you best fit? It might be safety, right? I don't know. Maybe he's not a pro, but maybe he is. I think he could be potentially. They do need to move somebody there, I think. With Dent, I mean, how long is he going to be out with the foot thing? Like, that's it. I don't know if he's going to play in spring ball. How much summer work does he get? He was a good player at times when he was healthy, and then sometimes he had a little head scratch and stuff. But let's just say, like, he's a solid player and somebody who's a valuable part of the defense when healthy. They definitely need another safety in the portal, and I don't know that there's anybody out there currently in the portal who they want. So I think that would probably be a post-spring thing, but some of your problems are going to need to be solved internally here, with younger guys stepping up, dudes bouncing back, Cooper, and if they can get anything out of Travis J, and then see where you can move Green around. But right now, like, I mean, all right, with Dent's injury, you have Shaheem Battle, who is, I think a very interesting player. Maybe not
Shaheem
like
Brown, but yeah.
Excuse me. Why do I keep calling him Battle? Sorry. Like an interesting player. Maybe not a great deep cover guy, but certainly I think a guy who's a very useful piece. You need a safety with range back there, especially if Dent is not, full or loses a step. I hope he's back, full. Like, it's just unfortunate injury in the bowl game there.
Ifs and wishes, whatever you want to say. I would be fascinating if Calvin Hussey could have enrolled early. That would be a guy that you potentially could see, like, immediately in your two deep and maybe more. But yeah, I mean, that's where we'll all turn our focus as far as remaining portal activity to be done. You might want to try to add a linebacker. That's delicate. You've got to really find a perfect fit there, and it'll be interesting to see if the juice is worth the squeeze on that one. But safety,
you want a 2-year guy, right? Like,
well, yeah, and also you'd want a 2-year guy. I think you think internally that you're about to be able to start recruiting linebackers from the high school level, that you get much more of the clay that you're looking for, long-term clay, linebacker in this new world of college football. Nothing's for free, but that's not necessarily a premium commitment level to be able to start getting high school prospects. I think that I'd be surprised. You're going to have to find something that's particularly almost a perfect fit, in my opinion, if you're going to add linebacker in the portal.
I tend to agree. I'm a little scared about linebacker in 24, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, they need to recruit the high school position better. I mean, you will see what they get out of the Georgia kid. Obviously, everybody in the country liked Nicholson a whole lot. That was a huge recruitment by Derek Ray. They're probably going to have to go portal in 24.
Mm-hmm.
I would can Lundy be a full-time starter for you, given his current level of athleticism and build? I have questions there. I think he's more of a role player type piece. I don't project Dix right now as a guy who can start for you. If you want to play at the level where like you're consistently trying to make the playoff, consistently competing for the ACC, Gant, it's got to be this is last year, right? Just I'm trying to think when he was recruited. Like I don't think he has another one, and even so, like he's not a starter, right? You're either in the portal for a linebacker this year or you're in it for next year, because like there's no way. I shouldn't say no way. I'd be surprised, man, and like. I mean, who are your starters next year at linebacker? Like maybe a Nicholson and Omar Graham,
Yeah.
I guess, but like that's threading the needle. Like it's kind of got to be those two guys, I think. Maybe. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I certainly have been before.
There's not a lot of. I mean, there's not a lot of alternative options, really. I mean, I expect you to grab a couple out of high school and levels of players that you haven't been involved with in a little while, as far as the high school level recruiting, and then I think you'll probably grab 2 out of the portal as well. You'll address both short and long after this year. So, and just to make you feel bad, I think I called, what do I call him, Calvin Hussey or whatever, rather than Conrad.
Conrad.
So, I just didn't want you feeling too bad about getting a name wrong there. But so
Shining Battle, by the way, is the starting safety at NC State.
Okay,
they're stud. So that's why
I was thinking maybe just had the battles in still on your mind as well. So
I probably did.
We've been throwing battle around a lot, and yes, Kevin a longtime Nolecast listener, evidently the Georgia did go out and do a great job of miraculously signing many of the top end linebackers in their transition to just having one of the better defenses ever, but still, relatively speaking, that's a position that you can address without having to make, say levels of commitment that get you in articles all over the country that you can't fulfill or are prepared to make good on. So
I had to shoot a TikTok on that.
Did you?
Not on the latter thing I think you're just implying, but on the Georgia linebacker. Yeah, Georgia went out and signed 3 of the top 5 linebackers in the nation. Yeah, including Raylan Wilson, who hit 23 mile an hour this year on the catapult, which schools are told that you want to, like, if you're a G5 school, receivers should run 20 mile an hour. And if you're a Power 5 school, receivers really need to be running like 21 and a half or 22 mile an hour. And Georgia just signed a 226-pound linebacker who's running 23 mile an hour, whose uncle was like that dude catching balls for the Houston Oilers back in the day, and whose dad was the leading receiver in FAMU history and played for the New Orleans Saints. So fairly high confidence that Raylan Wilson is going to be a good player for Georgia, in my opinion. He also returns punts. Tallahassee Lincoln kid.
Tallahassee Lincoln. Yep. It'd be great to get back in that school maybe in the future. But
that's not us bagging on the staff, by the way. Like, I don't think it's realistic for you to sign Raylan Wilson coming off a 5-7 campaign, right? Like, they were in on him early. Like, I may have some gripes about how some of the linebacker recruiting goes. That's not really one of them overall. Like, that's not if Georgia's going to go all in on the kid, given that they just won back-to-back titles and that's where you're aspiring to get. I'm not bagging on the staff. I'm not unrealistic in my expectation. I don't think. Okay, now looking at next year's schedule, I've been looking at some teams that lose a lot. Florida does lose an awful lot, by the way. They've already lost 2 offensive linemen to the portal. I think they've lost a couple of defensive linemen to the draft, and We'll see how they replace it. I'm fairly confident in this offensive line, though, next year, man. Like it took a step forward this year. And I'm going to pose a question. We all love the work that Jazz Turrentine did. Okay. Really do. That was the really smart use of their final scholarship. They saw one good game out of him against Florida for South Carolina and several poor games. If we're playing both sides of the coin there, you're like, all right, well, it's the last scholarship. It's summer. Who else we're going to get as an emergency tackle? Because they did like the FCS kid they had signed, obviously, who then gets hurt immediately, right? I don't know that you take a Jazz this year if the same level of player. I don't know that he would be second string on this roster. I think he might be like third string on this roster. You know, the Meach kid, I don't know. Does Meach start next year if he comes back? Or if he were to come back? I mean, he's not. I'm pretty sure he's not coming back. But like the level of player, I think this room is ascending, man. I think they have some dudes in here now who you got to feel pretty damn good about.
Undoubtedly, I think you have done with the offensive line that kind of what you hope to do to linebacker next year. You grab some high school studs that you can look at, see, begin to develop, and acknowledge that Lucas Simmons is a type of raw clay that you haven't had around here in a long damn time at tackle, and then we'll just have to wait and see Byers in the spring. But so far, if there's positive feedback to get on a kid, Byers has had a lot of it. So I think you did some nice work in the portal on that one, and that guy's going to be had the potential to be a very significant piece for you next year.
Yeah, like people from UTEP loved Byers. Other schools really liked Byers. That's a credit to Atkins and really the entire staff that got on him and made him feel needed immediately. I think he could start a tackle for you. Honestly, if I had to pick one guy about like who's your best lineman next year, even though I haven't seen him play at the Power 5 level, I'm picking Byers. I think he might immediately be your best offensive lineman and maybe an NFL guy. So I think that's a really, really nice get for them in the portal. And now, like, think about this. We can have legitimate debate about who's going to play tackle and not names that make you want to throw open your mouth. Okay. So I feel pretty good about Robert Scott. Get a full offseason of weight training, continue to ascend. Bless Harris is coming back. Sucks that he had the shoulder injury because I think upper body strength is an area that we had identified as him needing to improve pre-shoulder injury. But still, the fact that it happened early means that he has had some time to get back from it. Byers, Washington, we've seen can play some tackle. Now, against the best teams, is he going to hold up well against tackle? No. But he's not a horrendous player there. And you still have Julian Armella, right, who's coming back off getting dinged, and we'll see how well he can progress. If he doesn't win a tackle job, I wonder if he doesn't get some snaps on the inside, because I think he's going to be a player that they do value, getting snaps, kind of the same as Washington. And then on the interior, I mean, Smith, Roddick, you bring in the Keandre Jones kid from Auburn. He's a big-bodied kid, a little too big this year. Need to be a slightly lesser big body and kind of get back to that 2021 form. Jalen Early, we'll see what they ever get out of Schrader. You're starting, and I'm not just naming names. Like, these are guys that I think if you had to put in games, probably don't get you killed. And it's been a while since we've been able to say that. Like, man, they got, how many names did I just name off, dude? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's like 9.
Mm-hmm.
You feel, I don't know if I put Estes in that category as far as like somebody they trust yet. We'll see. Like, maybe he's another guy. Does he take a step this offseason potentially?
Yeah. Physically, he's there. We've got to have a little bit better idea as to what they're asking of him.
Consistency, yeah, in assignment for sure.
Strong, tough kid. If you can get him there, that I think Estes has a brighter future than some of the other guys that we've talked about on the interior. If it gets there, Estes has the potential to be a above average player for you. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, this could be like a top 20 room in the country for offensive linemen, I think. If all goes well. And then heck, like I think they'll probably get Simmons some snaps, especially in some of these blowout games. And I think that's increasingly important in the transfer portal era, right? That you get some guys some snaps. Now it does expose your dudes to the portal as well, like because other teams have seen them in games, but I think you want to be able to to develop some of those guys.
Well, you're not Simmons is a known commodity at this point. I don't know that you're going to be hiding him a whole lot, but
right.
Your point is correct. So
I mean, I said this on Cover 3, but like people are like, where are these? Hey, like you see any good tackles in the portal? I'm like, where are they hiding? Where do you think we're hiding these dudes at? Because I'm pretty sure that they're not hiding out there, right? Like, oh man. Another spot where they have not taken a player, and I thought they were going to, is receiver. We did see Malik McClain hit the portal. I think that was pretty expected given his snap share this year and the fact that he only has 2 years left to play.
I think candidly that's been an expectation for about 4 weeks now or so.
Yeah. I think he's going to go somewhere fairly good, just based on. I talked to a G5 coach at a very good G5 program about him, and he hit me up for his number. And then I asked the guy, how did it go? And he's like, I think he's going to go much bigger than us. So I hope he does well, man. Like I hope he goes somewhere and has a successful career and is able to flourish. It does say something about the receiver room that it has been flipped. That was one of the worst receiver rooms in the conference last year, or excuse me, not last year, 2021. I got to work on my last year now that we're in 23. In 21, this was one of the more embarrassing receiver rooms in the conference. And you're like, really, like this cannot be what Florida State is running out at receiver. Now, if they don't make a move, this is a big bet on Darren Williamson, right?
Yeah, it's Williamson, who they think a lot of. You get Winston Wright back, you'll see what that looks like and what and where he's able to contribute. Who knows if you want to believe the the dream of a young man from Louisiana as to whether or not he ever appears on campus for you. I'll save everybody I'll just be ambiguous with the name there, and we'll start talking about him if he does ever walk through the Moore building. But yeah, I mean, I think you're good at wide receiver, and also you just spend a lot of time and energy bringing in 2 of the better tight ends in the portal. That is going to change the availability of balls for wide receivers. You didn't bring Jaheim Bell in to not get him involved in the offense. So, and Morlock will evolve in time as well. So, and you've got a guy in Douglas that's developing into an absolute tool. So, I just don't know that there's going to be that many balls to catch out there for wide receivers. And Malik, made a decision that he thought was best for him. And I certainly understand where he was coming from.
Yeah, I mean, if he can go to an Auburn or an Ole Miss, a place that, I mean, as far as like the routes that you're asked to run, those 2 schools within his geographic footprint, I mean, the kids from Mobile, right, would be like, it's just kind of go deep, right, within those. If you think about it, like when NFL teams got Laquan Treadwell out of Hugh Freeze's system at Ole Miss, they're like, this guy know how to run any routes? They're like, bro, you drafted him. Did you watch the film? Right. So I think he actually could flourish in the SEC in that type of system, but FSU has flipped the room to where he was not getting on the field as much. I don't know. I could see them go portal for receiver post spring if Williamson is not taking the step, which I think like he probably will. I do trust Mike Norvell in his evaluation of receivers typically. I mean, that's the position he played. He's done a really nice job of that throughout his career. Or if Wright is just not going to get back to what he was pre-car crash. But I mean, right now, like I still think you like the receiver room. I was a big like Pokey Wilson was. I know you were too. Like underrated part of this offense this year. He was a guy who could take the top off the defense. Did so against Miami. Did so against Oklahoma. That's the one thing that they need to make sure that they have secured. And that's sort of like if Williamson replaces Pokey, awesome.
Yeah.
Like let's do this thing. And then you get Hakeem involved as well, right? And that's something that I think they will be really intent on doing.
I drove down to Tallahassee unexpectedly a couple times recently. I've had a couple meetings. There's no better place for me to sit down with somebody than Charlie Park. Charlie Park, rooftopbar.com, Tallahassee's best rooftop bar. Matt Thompson and his team, impossible to be better supporters of Florida State athletics or to understand the emotional investment that crazy fans like us make. And whether it be Township, Madso, Charlie Park, just For the Table Restaurant Group, fantastic influence on the Tallahassee dining scene as well. And even ran by Madso, but just so that I could get that Madso feeling. And there are no better places in Tallahassee. And as always, we thank Matt and his team.
We do. Trayshawn Ward to Kansas State. That's a nice get for Kansas State.
Yeah, great get for Trayshawn. You never know exactly, what's involved in this, but I think Trayshawn was his talent was appreciated, and I think that he that thrills me. That's great, man. If he was able to get what it was from a NIL perspective that I think he might have, then that's brilliant for him, brilliant for that kid, and good for Kansas State to go out there and see a piece that they think they can plug in and immediately continue to kind of help pursue the upward trajectory that program's had over the past couple of years.
No doubt. Like if he can get paid as a number one running back NIL perspective wise, and Kansas State has stepped up their NIL efforts. I do know that because when they had the Avery kid committed at quarterback, other schools came calling and Kansas State had to get their business together with the quickness. I talked to a guy on their staff at convention and they're confident in where they are, within reason, obviously. But I mean, look, an NIL check may be the only check Trayshawn Ward ever earns to play football. Okay. Like I love Trayshawn Ward. I think we were the only show saying it's fine if they don't take a running back. Remember, was it Newberg who was saying like, how can you not take a running back? I'm like, I was like, dude, Trayshawn's from Tampa where you live. Like, how do you not like, I don't know. I like the kid a lot, but he's not a big guy. And he does get caught from behind, which suggests that his long speed is not great. If he assuming he gets a combine invite, if that 40 time doesn't go well, he's not a draft pick. And I assume maybe he'll make a roster practice squad. Maybe he'll run faster than I expect. Maybe he'll unlock some kind of gear. But that's a guy you got to root for. From a walk-on to a dude who may go start at a team that just played in the Sugar Bowl. And it also is a commentary on where you are as a room. That you got a guy who clearly jumped him, and you got young dudes in, Lawrence Philly and Rodney Hill and guys like that who are, I'm sure the staff thinks is kind of right there.
Yeah.
A lot of talk about Singletary from Georgia. I haven't heard anything on that. Sorry, just kind of going through some comments here. Let's talk FSU in the top 25. I had them, I think, 8th in my way too early top 25 on cover 3. Behind who do I have? Georgia, Bama, the 3 Big Ten schools, LSU, Texas, I think. You could put, I really like, when I was doing my tiers, I think you could put them anywhere between like 6th and 13th, depending on kind of how you see things playing out. And this will change quite a bit. Oregon State last night, their best linebacker, maybe their best defensive player, hit the portal. So I'm moving them down some. I don't really want to stand on my January rankings of people. Although I will say, I'll give you guys a freebie here. already have about as much as I can get. Barstool opened the Noles at 150 to 1 to win the national title, and it got bet down to 100 to 1. Do I think FSU can win the national title? Probably not. Right. Do I think that they should be priced 100 to 1 to win it? No, right. I don't. Like, they're not going to be 2 touchdown dogs to anybody in the playoff if they make it. Just run the math on that. 100 to 1, I think, is something that should get bet down. Yeah. So if you guys live in a Barstool state, there you go. Merry Christmas. Always play responsibly, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, 100 to 1's a little high. Oh, we got a prediction here. Canes 24, Knowles 17.
Moles.
Oh,
Not
moles.
Even Knowles.
Okay.
Just some moles. Yeah.
Kirby voted FSU 18th.
18, yeah.
How much do you think Kirby's paying attention to anybody who's not playoff caliber right now?
Probably very little, but still, you just gotta lean into it. Kirby's from Bainbridge. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But I think I fully expect Florida State to open up with a single digit next to their name. No, I think that'll be 8 or 9, but would it shock me to see them be 6? No, it wouldn't. So we'll see what happens from there. You want to talk Rashada real quickly? It seems to be a popular thing in the chat.
Yeah. We talked a lot about this on Cover 3 yesterday. I don't have a 100% feel for what's going on there because everybody with information on this has a slant on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do we want to think about this? I mean, clearly it's something going on. I know the Gators 247 site, we read this on Cover 3, reported that it was not a transcript issue. It's an NIL thing. The Orlando Sentinel has reported that it was a $13 million NIL deal that has now collapsed. My level of skepticism on that number is high, and I'm not involved with that negotiation or any negotiation, but 13 million over 4 years still feels pretty high based on what I know kids at other schools. Like, I talked to guys from a lot of different schools, and a lot of handlers and things have got. Does 13 million hypothetically sound high to you over 4 years for the number 7 quarterback in the country?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not appropriate for me to talk a whole lot about other people's business, but what I will say is it's very rare that I've ever seen a number in this space be accurate. It is tough. And just from a pure standpoint, I think maybe some guys will have an end with a program, say, and I'm hesitant to do this purely, let's say Georgia. Okay. I'm not hinting at anything, but let's say I'm from Atlanta and I know a player personnel guy at Georgia. So I know what Georgia may value a defensive tackle, or I know what Georgia may value an outside linebacker at. And then I'm like, oh, well, these staffs are pretty similar. I'm going to extrapolate that as to what the outside linebacker market is. Well, it's just not how it works. People are all over the board when it comes to this. I would be very surprised if that 13 number is accurate, but yeah, I mean, that's a real situation that they're going to have to try to unwind. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I think The Athletic reported that Nico, who's the number 2 player in the country, got 8 million from Tennessee.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a guess. Like, that's actually like reporting that they got, I think, from his camp.
It's also interesting. These are California kids, so you could you could have entered into said contract with them. That may, I mean, you can, for those that aren't aware, you can NIL high school athletes in California. There was a theory a year ago that, oh my God, all these California kids are going to have such a higher premium on them because you can do such a thing. Who knows, man? That's a absolutely wild situation.
I mean, he also switched agents at some point.
Yeah.
So I think months ago. So we'll see. I'm fascinated to see how that plays out. Right now, I ran my very early numbers next year. I have Florida going 5-7.
Mm.
So now Rashada is not impacting that a whole lot, but it wouldn't shock me if they do somehow find a way to get him, which at this point, like if I had to guess, I would say probably not. But who knows? This is an unprecedented space. There's no real foundation that you're making predictions off unless you just know, and I don't know. But like they could get Rashada could play for them this year. Kitna's gone. Richardson's gone. They had to take Graham Mertz in the portal because certain guys in the portal are actually either not graduating or academically ineligible. And then Pratt and Harris went back to their Tulane and UTSA respectively. I mean, this is an interesting time for them in Gainesville, to be sure.
Maybe that's just the fan in me, and maybe we're a good bit into this podcast, so we can table it. And this is good off-season talk, both in the fact as to whether or not this is true or how much it matters. But are there maybe elements of 2010 in the air right now with Florida having some real internal problems? And, we'll see exactly, as my alarm system chimes in, we'll see exactly what, Miami looks like. Now, when I say, does it even matter, is, all these other schools are so much, their level of influence in recruiting the state of Florida is so higher than it was 10, 12, 15 years ago. But to me, anyway, it does feel like there may be a window for Florida State to step in right now, display a level of competency and a program with a level of consistency that maybe the two other major in-state powers don't have to offer. And, we'll see what happens with it. But I think the landscape is certainly shaping up favorably for Florida State right now.
I think the odds that Miami and Florida do not combine for at least 9 losses this year coming up are low. I think they're going to combine to lose at least 9 games. I don't know who's going to lose them, and the transfer portal will change all of our opinions over the next 4 to 6 months. But you do have a window. I mean, there's a non-zero chance that FSU goes 12-0. I think they're going to be somewhere. People hate when we do this, but they're going to be somewhere between 8-4 and 12-0, unless they just get totally crushed by injury, right? Florida's probably an underdog in 5 games, maybe 6 games, with a couple other coin flips. That's tough. You kind of want to have the Vandy game on the road. Now, I know they screwed around and lost it this year, but you don't want that to count as one of your home games. You want to use the Swamp to your advantage. This is the year that the Georgia game counts as a home game.
Okay.
So this is tough for them, because Florida has to play, and I actually looked at this the other day. Florida has to play, that means 4 non-Vanderbilt SEC road games. And people don't like when we use the SEC term, and I agree, because some of these schools are SEC in name only. But their road games this year are at Kentucky, and Kentucky just got Leary in the portal from NC State. At South Carolina, who they whipped this year, and South Carolina's lost a couple players recently. You may have noticed that. At LSU and at Missouri. I mean, that is a tough setup, right? Then they host Arkansas, host the Noles, neutral site against Georgia, host Vandy, host Tennessee. Oh, and they open this year at Utah, and Utah has now kept Cam Rising and kept Brent Keithy. And this was the one year that I thought Utah was just young pups on the offensive defensive line. Utah's returning almost everybody of consequence along the lines of scrimmage. And Utah is usually not a team you push around. You could push them around a little bit this year. They're also a much different team at home. We're minute 69 here. Utah is my highest split in my ratings, home field versus road advantage.
Really interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
I use a flat 5 for them.
Wow.
They play way different at home for some reason. Ask USC the first. I guess they beat USC on a neutral site too, but they really do play, and I don't know why. If it's elevation or just whatever it is. Does Florida make a bowl? the odds say I think so, but like it's not guaranteed. And if that's your year 2, ask Mike Norvell how hard it was to recruit last January. Ask Mike how hard it was to recruit, in March and in April, and heck, like August.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Coming off back-to-back seasons where.
Well, and add in some further clutter or complications with this subject matter and some other. There's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity for Florida State to step in to avoid, certainly. So
what Mike did is not normal, and it's not normal to go from back-to-back losing seasons to all of a sudden winning 10 games. That's not a normal thing that happens. Like you kind of had a bit of a rare event there. That may be what Florida needs in 24, because it's hard for me to see them really crushing it this year. Now they could. I mean, I don't want to act like Tennessee based off one good year is unbeatable, and who knows what South Carolina is, but they're going to be in some dogfights. So what else do we have here? I'm going to hold off on any of the junior day stuff until I see who shows up. Also, I'm going to battle Miami and battle, Pylon Orlando coming up over the next few weekends. So we'll have a better feel for, some of the young guys emerging and how they just all stack up physically. It is different, I think, to see them in the Under Armour rather than pads, just of like, how big are their shoulders, like what do they really look like physically? And I know we'll be talking a lot about that, but the chat is loving this Florida talk. Okay.
Yeah. Chat's had a good time. Yeah, man, this has been a fun show. It's been a fun show. We'll have something for you here in a week or so, and we'll kind of slide into our off-season routine. I don't really know that we'll have a whole lot built around traditional signing day, so we'll fall into this, lead our way up to spring, and enjoyed it as always, my man.
Oh, last thing for you, and I also enjoyed it. Pat Surtain, you hired him as an on-field coach, so this idea on Twitter that he will not be able to recruit American Heritage is just complete. That's nonsense. If you hire him as an on-field coach, he can recruit anywhere he wants to. So,
okay. Hadn't seen that one, but
Miami Twitter lawyers. Not
okay, brilliant. Well, that's would explain why I hadn't run across that. But all right, y'all. Until next time, thoroughly enjoyed it as always. Colin, you're right. No off season. How dare I mutter such a phrase? But until next time, this has been the Nolecast.